You say Monday. Mobile. Monday. All right. Hey guys, welcome. If you guys find a chair, actually I think there are more people here than there are chairs. So find any seat you can get. Tonight we have a great panel organized. We have apps versus web apps. I think there's an interesting. It's been a long discussion debated in whether should I build an app first or start with a web app, or does it really matter? So we have Singh from Yum Yum. Will be our moderator. And also tonight we are also being sponsored by Google. Hey Mike, can you get Carrie from? Oh, there's. All right. So Carrie, you can from Google. We have a couple of words, and thanks to her, you guys have some nice beer in this nice place, and some nice cookies. So I'll introduce Carrie. Carrie, come on up.
As Maria said, my name is Carrie Buchanan. I am a product marketing manager for the AdMob team at Google. And the funny thing is, the last time we sponsored Mobile Monday, we were just AdMob. Now we're part of the larger Google organization, and we're really excited about that. So excited that we decided to bring you all cookies to celebrate. So if you haven't gotten a cookie yet, make sure you grab one before they're all gone. AdMob is now Google's leading mobile display ad network. We help mobile publishers monetize their apps and sites, and we provide advertisers with a new, innovative way to reach their customers on mobile devices. We're still innovating on the AdMob network, which is great news. We'll be delivering new products and features soon, so stay tuned for that. And Google in general is committed to fueling the growth of the mobile ecosystem. So we thought that this apps versus web discussion would be kind of an interesting way to spend the evening. So hopefully, I think Mario has put together an excellent panel of experts, so looking forward to this. I hope you guys all enjoy. And if you are a mobile publisher and interested in monetizing your app or site, find me or one of the other AdMob people in the room, or visit our website, and we can help you out with that. So thanks. Yeah.
Okay, so Carrie, you'll be manning afterwards the table when you have questions. Cool. All right, so I'll warm you up guys with some questions before I introduce Raj and the panel. All right, so how many of you here are developers? Curious. All right. How many guys are in marketing and product? Business development? Okay. How many are lawyers here? Okay, media. Who's from the media? Wow. So over there, who's over there? Is that Trisha from Moco News? You're here. Great. Cool. So we have a good thing. So I'm going to ask another question about platforms and kind of on the app side. How many of you guys are currently or plan to develop on Brew? Wow. Okay. Qualcomm is here. All right. Okay, now Palm. How many people are doing Palm? All right. Palm people. All right. How many guys are doing Java? Java. And does it include Android? Java. Okay. And then Symbian. There are Symbian folks, so. Android. You guys are Android. Okay, so I have a question. How many people first developed with iPhone and now are moving to Android? How many people started with a mobile web and then went to an app? So everyone went to an app first? Who went to an app first? Okay, wow. Then iPhone, iOS, everyone. Okay. And then Windows Mobile, is that so relevant? Wow. Okay.
How's that big?
Wow. We see comebacks. I saw Rocky. Okay. So wow, this is interesting. So these guys kind of have an understanding of what the demographic is here tonight. So the format's going to be, I'll introduce Raj, we'll do the panel about 45 minutes, we'll probably leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers, and then We do their typical community stuff as announcements. So that's if you're hiring, you're looking for someone to hire, you're looking for work. If you have an event that's coming up that's mobile related, or if you're selling your car or something like that. We'll do at the end is we'll just form a line here, and this will just queue everyone up, and then you guys can do your announcements. And then the bars and stuff will be open up afterwards. So, okay. So I'd like to introduce Rod Singh, and tonight is apps versus web apps.
All right, so we got a full house and a full panel. So just to reiterate what Mario said, I'll try to reserve, because we have such a big house. Usually I take questions as I go through the panel, but we have so many folks here. I'll try to reserve 10 minutes at the end so you can hold your questions towards the end. So apps versus web apps, this is a topic that's quite dear to me. I used to work in the browser space, so it's something I've thought about quite a bit. I know it's been discussed a lot, so I'm going to try to take a totally different angle today and change it up, so hopefully we can learn a few things. So real quickly, I want to just quickly introduce the panel. So Patrick, maybe starting with you, just keep it to like 15 seconds, name, and where you're at, etc.
Hi everybody, my name is Patrick Mork. I'm Chief Marketing Officer of GetJar. GetJar is the world's largest cross-platform app store. We do about 80-90 million downloads a month across 200 countries for all handsets. Love developers. Thanks.
Awesome.
Hi, Scott, VP of Marketing at Appcelerator. So we kind of bring both these worlds together. We take web developers, you have your JavaScript skills out there, those are the folks we're looking for, and we turn you into native app developers, iOS or Android and so forth. We have about 72,000 web developers using our stuff today, and pumping out about 1,000 native applications a month. And certainly happy to be here.
Hey, so I'm Daniel Zucker. I'm at Nokia, currently in Nokia Research Labs. Before this, I was in Symbian Software. But one thing that really makes this topic really near and dear to my heart is before this, I worked at Access, which is a big mobile web browser vendor, NetFront. And I was really instrumental in kind of pushing the idea of web apps early on. So something I love the concept of web apps is near and dear to me. Also, I want to announce that I am writing a book, and our publisher has kindly agreed to give away 10 free ebooks. So if you're interested in a free ebook on both web and application development, come see me after the talk, and I have some coupons. Thanks a lot.
Hi, Roy Satterthwaite, and I'm with Opera Software. I head up the Americas region for Opera Software. You may know Opera is a Norwegian-based company and a browser platform vendor, so it's going to be hard to hide my side on this panel, but I'll try to make some logical arguments. We have both a consumer model where you can download Opera Mini. Many of you do on iPhones all the way down to feature phones. And we have a business-to-business part of our business where we work with operators, device manufacturers, OEMs, and work with them on our browser platform for web apps, widgets, apps, and the like.
My name is Steve Paddon. I'm with Trilibis Mobile. I'm VP of Product there. Trilibis Mobile has a mobile web publishing technology and enablement platform. So basically that means we help online brands bring their online content to mobile browsers. Our platform used to be focused on both web development as well as cross-platform development. We're now launching our 5th generation, which just focuses on mobile web, so where we're focused is pretty obvious.
Hi, I'm Matt Womer. I'm from the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C. Don't buy or sell anything. We're like NPR, we're a non-profit member-supported organization trying to build the foundation of the web to be open, royalty-free, and something that will be there for the future. Thanks.
Thank you. So I know Mario's done a few polls. I want to do a couple polls too before we get started. I'm curious how many people in the audience think within 10 years browser would be the standard development environment. And so keep your hands up. How about 5 years? 3 years? Next year? Okay, all right. So just trying to level set. We'll come back to this towards the end of the panel. Is there anyone in the audience who believes that maybe I'm biased, maybe I'm phrasing the question the wrong way, but is there anyone in the audience who believes that web apps will never become the standard? Ever? All right, cool. So we need some contention. So we're gonna use it as we make progress. So I want to start with definitions. I like to refer to it as native versus web apps. I know the title of the panel is apps versus web apps. So Patrick, starting with you, GetJar, app catalog, you offer native apps as well as bookmarks or web apps. How do you define? How do we define the two ecosystems?
Yeah, I think we define it basically as an app is something that runs natively on a handset. Right? Something that's been coded and designed for a handset is actually a file that's downloaded by a consumer onto a handset or sideloaded onto a handset. The web is anything that's actually running from the web. Being very simplistic, but that's a little bit how we see it.
Steve?
Yeah, it'd be similar. If it's written in the native OS, then that's a native application. If it leverages the browser, that would be mobile.
So Steve, within jumping to Scott, so within Appcelerator, there's a lot of apps that are embedded browser that are wrapped as sort of a container. How do you define that as native, or do you define that as web?
Right. Yeah. So our technology, just to be super clear, is actually a low-level JavaScript to iOS or JavaScript to Android binding layer. So we actually don't even have the web container inside our apps. We'd like to just go pure native, but use your web skills. But I do think there is certainly the hybrid approach, right? Which is to say that over the last 15 years, there's been a lot of movement over, say, more legacy operating systems, if you will, right? And using your web skills, JavaScript skills, super efficient cross-platform. But at the same time, there's certainly room for using those skills to build those fully native applications. So we, again, bring the two worlds together.
So web as a development environment, but the output's native.
Correct, that's right. It's important, I think, to separate those two pieces because we certainly do, and I think that as we kind of go forward, it certainly will be separated.
Roy, Opera has the widget platform, obviously deployed on a number of handsets. How do you define the widgets? Do you define those as native, or do you define those as web apps?
Yeah, so I think widgets would be one of these hybrid models where, yes, there's websites and yes, there's downloadable apps, but widgets are in the form of a web-based application that looks and feels to the consumer like a native app in many cases, and especially in a lot of the use cases for the quick access sports scores and weather, things like that. But essentially, they are downloadable applications. They leverage the local record store in memory of the browser. They allow for API access. It's a bit of a hybrid model out there.
Okay, so downloadable files. So developed in the web, but maybe compiled to a file. It ends up as a native application.
And to the consumer, they may not know.
Okay, all right. So now that we have the definition, sort of, is it a download, or I guess is it native, or does it run in the browser as web app versus native? I want to take a few different perspectives in sort of answering this question. So given that the majority of this audience is developers, I want to start with the developer perspective. Daniel, you used to work in the browser space, obviously with Wake 3. A lot of folks would argue that native is a better choice because of the technical benefits. Access to sensors, camera, file location, etc. Do you agree, or is that something that's going away?
Yeah, personally, I think that's going away. So I am a big proponent of web development. Of course, Nokia offers both, so we have both our web SDK and Qt SDK. But I believe the native access is something that increasingly you're seeing more and more web access to the API. So in Nokia, for example, we have our Nokia Service Platform 2.0, which gives you access to things like camera, GPS, all the stuff you want access to. And W3C is actually in the process of standardizing those APIs. So hopefully as that standard becomes better implemented out there, I think basically just like writing a web app, just like you're going to see, just in the same way you support basic native HTML tags, you're going to have this suite of device services.
And which bucket are you in? Are you in the 3-year, 2-year, 5-year?
That's a good question. I guess I'm in the 3 to 5 year.
3 to 5 year bucket that will have access to all the devices. So jumping in back, you're with the W3C, obviously. Where are we with these standards at HTML5?
Well, HTML5, I mean, it's both a standard in and of itself, but it's also used as kind of this catch-all for lots of different standards.
The healthcare bill is what I heard at Mobilize.
Well, I mentioned before, the healthcare bill is probably more readable. The standards are written by engineers for engineers, and so they can be kind of, dense and hard to read. But you know, if I had to pick a place where
Developer perspective.
why you would pick like a native app over a web app, I would say it would have to be the, you know, on iOS, the ease with which you can charge. You know, it's simple to find, simple to install, all this sort of stuff. And I think even Android has the same problems, you know, in their uptake of native apps, where not as many people are paying for them. It's more difficult to find, things like that. And web apps certainly have the same set of issues.
So you think technically web apps HTML5 will be capable of solving?
Will be, yes.
Okay.
You know, but I think the primary problem is, you know, for a lot of apps isn't necessarily a technical.
Right. Well, and we'll jump to a few other perspectives. Roy, Opera, Charles, your colleague, I think he has a title of like Chief Standards Officer. He's, you know, the King of Standards. OMTP Bondi Initiative, WAC, everything seems to be failing. What's your belief in terms of, and just to preface and give you some background, these are initiatives to try to enable native device access through web programming language, WebScript. So what is your opinion on this? Is it moving to HTML5? Is it going to happen? Or is it, as much of the audience seems to believe, that this year it's still all native, next year it's all native?
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, you can't argue with the momentum of applications, no doubt. But, you know, I think it's good to apply the 80-20 rule to this, right? In the desktop world, 10 years ago or so, you know, 80% of the apps were native, 20, meaning you either had to use the web or get a CD-ROM, whatever, however you wanted to do it. But you did all your financial planning and all your enterprise, it was all native, and only a few were web-based. So that's all changed, obviously, right? And in, you know, mobile, today, it's all about downloadables and very few web apps. But, you know, there's no one will argue that that is not, you know, binary. It's not, you know, it's very kind of gradual shift we're seeing. So I think what you'll see over time is, you know, the quick evolution of the standards. And in many cases, even though standards may exist, it's not always the standards body in the latest revision that ends up being the commercial deployment. And what you see sometimes is certain vendors will take the best of a standard, whether it be an OEM, whether it be an operator, you know, could come from every corner, and they'll take the standard and commercialize it, become successful, and that makes the de facto standard. So, you know, a lot of times before mobile standards, even desktop standards, it wasn't always the standard that people envisioned. It was who made it the most commercial results.
Volume drive standard, YouTube drove Flash.
Let me just jump in and say something maybe controversial, and that is liven the panel up a little bit. So I think what's kind of exciting about the browser space is that pretty much everyone uses WebKit except for maybe Opera. So that's the controversial part. But the fact that we basically have one open source
I used to be your friend.
So the fact that, you know, if WebKit implements HTML5 or a certain flavor of HTML5, that's pretty much going to get out there to everyone, except for Opera and IE. But really, I mean, look at, I think it's RIM.
Unless, of course, they become HTML5 ACID compliant.
Yeah,
as, you know, as the W3C dictate. So moving along from the developer perspective, as compared to the past, one of the things that has changed, a lot of apps today are very networked. And I've heard arguments as to web apps are better from a sort of service-oriented architecture in terms of building applications as opposed to native, where there may be more efforts required, et cetera, to implement these sort of networked-based applications. Steve, you know, through Appcelerator, I'm Scott, sorry, through Appcelerator, you know, I think there's like 18,000 applications built on your platform. What is your perspective? Is there a particular development environment that's better for network applications?
Yeah, we're not quite there. We're only at 5 and growing about 1,000 a month, but it's certainly climbing. You know, I mean, so look, we fall squarely down on a native experience will always be a superior experience to a web application experience, and we come from that from the web perspective, and so if we look at every single capability now that you really want to have as an application developer, it typically falls into, you know, well, do I want to have all the capabilities or part of the capabilities? I think certainly from a networking perspective, I think there's, you know, some sense of parity, but then after you get that information on the device, and you actually start manipulating it, and you actually start doing something with it, I think then you start playing, you know, well, there's push notification on there, I don't know, full database, well, sort of, you know, and you get these sort of mixed experiences, and we don't believe that a mixed experience is optimal.
Okay, so you think the benefits start becoming more and more apparent as we technically go more and more downstream?
Correct, that's right, absolutely.
So Daniel, jumping to you, do you think there's inherent benefits in building server-based applications as a web app as opposed to a native app?
I think it's not so much of a technical difference, but I do think the type of people who are used to building service applications are very used to web development. So basically, it's almost an operational advantage that when you're trying to build a real product, those are the people who know how to build those services. So from that point of view, it is a very good fit.
Okay, so the expertise is in the web developers in terms of service-oriented.
Yeah, I think that's right.
I definitely agree with that.
Okay, so let's, another sort of developer perspective. Development time. Very recently I heard that application logic can often take longer as a web application than a native application. Steve, Trilibis, you go through this sort of analysis, I guess, with each client as to whether you want to build native or web. How do you determine and how do you scope? Is that accurate in terms of development time?
Yeah, that I don't know anything directly to compare that to. It can be a challenge to integrate with the web services layer for highly connected applications, and there are some limitations there if you're looking for secure protocols and so on. But the reality is, if it's a highly connected experience anyway, and your interfaces. Once you've built that interface, you don't have to worry about now when a new operating system comes out and now I need to update my code base. All that goes away because you've already built that interface layer and you're done with one shot.
Do you build apps faster than web or native internally?
We don't build native apps.
So you don't build anything? Okay, no. So everything web. Patrick at GetJar, you talk to a lot of developers. Have you heard anything in terms of development time, web versus native?
No, I honestly, we don't really differentiate that much between web versus native. And the simple reason basically is that we support both. But for us, the issue is really kind of from the consumer perspective of, what's the consumer looking for, what kind of device do they use, what's the expectation. So for us, basically 10% of our downloads today are actually coming from, these mobile site shortcuts, or web apps essentially. And so from the consumer perspective, it's basically, I want access to my content, I want access to it now, and I want it to be easy to use. And so essentially, there are a large number of consumers out there, whether it's, your neighbor, your cousin, my wife, people down the block, who don't really differentiate that much between the two. They essentially say, I want access to YouTube. And as long as there's an icon on my phone that takes me to YouTube, it doesn't really matter to me whether that's a native application or whether that is a web app. It's a question of expectation.
Absolutely agree. We're going to jump to the consumer perspective in a bit. With HTML5 and the developer perspective, one sort of assumption people make with web apps is they don't have to port. But there's different screen sizes, there's different icons required for different platforms, maybe color depth, maybe the browsers are not necessarily as compliant. Daniel, do you have any perspective on this? Is HTML5 porting going to be as big of an ecosystem as native app porting?
It's a good question. I do think you're right. The way you describe things is the way it exists today. There are small differences between all the major platforms, so it is not a write once, run everywhere. I'm hoping that will go away in the future, and I do believe many of this can be addressed today with well-written libraries. So if you write your stuff on top of libraries that handle this, then it's not an issue. But I would say, without predicting the future, I do say it's a challenge that I hope we will overcome, because I definitely want to see write once and run everywhere.
Right.
Yeah, no bad.
So moving along then, there's a number of companies, obviously Appcelerator being one of them, PhoneGap, others, that are focused on sort of building these web platforms to try to make write once, run anywhere. Can you describe a little bit about how that works?
Yeah, sure. So it's another 80-20 rule. We may get into a lot of 80-20 rules because that's what you get into when you get into the web development. But no, it's core, it's underlying services, right, that can be leveraged. So if it's file system or network or database or camera or all these sorts of things that are common, right, then you can sort of extrapolate that away. So you can basically build an API. So for example, defining a map, right? Defining a map on a Google device versus an iOS device. So in our language, that's about 12 lines of code. So for all you iOS developers out there, Java, Android developers out there, think of the lines of code you need to actually define a map. But then that's basically, it's lat long. Here's the range. I want to animate the pin, and this is what I want to click and interact with.
Unified libraries across all platforms.
Unified libraries across all that. What's different are the specific features and functionalities that are specific to a device, right? So you've got the cover flow type of animation widget on iOS. You've got custom intents on Android. You've got these different services that are custom, that need their own space. And so those things you need to be accounted for.
Patrick, jumping to you, pushing down the sort of developer perspective. QA, something all developers care about. One of the arguments for web development is that there are more QA automation tools. It's easier to test web applications. Have you heard anything from developers in terms of QA, web versus native, and or how does GetJar test web versus native as they submit to GetJar?
We don't really test. I mean, to be honest, the way that we, crazy thing, but the way that we manage it is that essentially everything is community driven, right? It's all basically down to the consumer and basically what their feedback on the application, be it web or native application is. And essentially, that's what drives downloads. If you're a successful developer, it means that you have a good product that essentially is going to work across multiple platforms, across multiple handsets, and that the community of people who are downloading are leaving you that kind of feedback and are downloading your application, which either boosts your rankings, or if you have a poor application, because it hasn't been QA, that basically penalizes it.
So use of ratings and comments and feedback.
Yeah, essentially the thing is that for a company our size, even though we've got 75,000 apps on GetJar, it's totally unmanageable if we're at a QA every single application. It's just,
Matt, the W3C has the acid test for browsers. Do you think there needs to be a test for web apps?
Yeah, and
Is there an acid test for the web?
We have actually a mobile web app best practices tester thing, an acid test for mobile web applications, and it, we have the materials out there. We know what the right things to do to test these things on. So I suggest people check it out.
Daniel, so sort of wrapping up the developer perspective, and given your browser background, I'm jumping back to you here. How should native versus web? Final sort of 2 cents. We'll jump back to this towards the end of the panel. But how should we choose from a technical perspective?
Yeah, tough. I would say, so my personal benchmark is if I'm looking for really low-level hardware performance, something like a game, something where I really want to get down there, worry about every single bit, then I'm going to look at native development. If I'm looking at some fast development to just give a basic UI to a user, do something on the net, then I'm going to look at web development. So yeah, that's the quick answer. So I'd say that falls into the 80-20 rule. Probably not everyone's going to be writing games, so I would say most of what you can do, you can do.
You could probably apply that 80-20 rule to the category of iPhone apps out there today. 80% of them could have been done easily, no difference to the consumer through web applications, and some needed the accelerometer and high performance game. That probably applies right as you lay over top of that app store.
Okay, so I want to switch perspective. I want to switch to the business owner perspective. My motivations are obviously making money and getting users. So Steve, at Mobile 2.0, one of the interesting insights was, from a technical perspective, everybody wanted to build web apps, but from a monetization perspective, everyone wanted to build native. How do you sort of navigate that within Trilibis?
Well, that's unfortunately still a big problem. Monetization on the mobile web is still difficult. It used to be actually easier with the content that we published because the carrier catalogs had a lot of distribution power, and once you got in, your content accepted, you could leverage their billing systems and direct carrier billing. You can still do that, but that's still a long, difficult process and requires a pretty good sales team. So it's not an option for a lot of small publishers. But on the other hand, yeah, that's provided, especially it works really well on the iPhone. But once the app stores got crowded, is that really realistically a great moneymaker channel either?
So going down that path, sort of, Roy, with Opera and the widgets, do you have paid widgets, or are you thinking about how to, obviously being a big proponent of web development, how do you enable paid web apps?
Well, with using, back to this hybrid category, of using the browser platform as a downloadable app platform, meaning it's a downloadable XML file as a widget, not a native app. Developers can monetize them very much in the same way they do native apps. So to the consumer, it looks the same, it's downloading, it performs the same. So all the monetization rules that apply to a native app can apply to a widget. Specifically to answer your question, we're working with carriers in North America and South Latin America, but Vodafone is probably our most publicized flagship customer in UK of monetizing both from a kind of a per application fee structure and also from in-app advertising, or in this case, in widget advertising, which is also monetization.
Do you consider your paid sort of hybrid app, basically container app with embedded browser built using web development, as a stopgap for sort of browser as the development platform and app, or do you think that model will continue to exist 5 years from now?
Well, I think that model will exist in that consumers are conditioned today for downloadable apps, and in some cases, because of speed, performance, record store, for a lot of reasons, you develop a native app, you still may want to have a downloadable web apps. And of course, this 80-20 rule being thrown around, we'll see a migration of things that used to be native to go to just websites and maybe mobile versions of websites.
Matt, Google announced with the Chromium OS the Web App Store. So this is an app store for web apps. I don't know if you have any insight to that, but I'm sure there's a lot of Google folks in the audience, and we can take that back. At the end of the panel. But any thoughts or how that might work? How would you build a web app store?
Well, I think actually we already have some on the panel here. GetJar sells web apps, and Opera with Vodafone 360 sells web apps. So they might actually be able to answer that a bit better.
Patrick?
It's basically the same discovery process and the same selling process as a normal application. Again, it depends on how robust the web app is and what it is that it does, and whether the consumer has a perceived value that they're willing to pay for that. But again, many consumers don't necessarily see the difference, unless they're on smartphones that have very high-end expectations. So it depends what your product is and how good the consumer thinks it is.
So do you have, of the 10% of apps submitted into GetJar that are web apps, do you have paid web apps?
We have some, but few.
And
it is more difficult to monetize.
And what is that workflow? How do they purchase it, and how does the web publisher prevent consumers from just accessing that web page?
Well, one of the methods that we've seen, which is I think this one's very basic, but if you look at Fandango, for example, they clearly sell services via mobile web, but you have to have an account set up on Fandango beforehand, and it's credit card based. So that's clearly not ideal. That's the example of how some of the folks are doing it. Another example is a UK developer called Flirtomatic, and essentially it's a dating service. And in order to be able to use the service and to buy flirt points, you have to basically log in, but you log in via PC, and again, it's the same methodology. You basically create an account, you put in a credit card, and you can buy flirt points using that and redeem those points on your mobile phone.
But this is through the web publisher, or is this through a GetJar billing?
No, this is through this is through a third party.
Okay. Daniel, within Ovi, given you're from Nokia, Nokia is obviously pushing a lot of things around web apps. Do you think, how do you think the Ovi store could implement sort of web-based payment for web apps?
Well, yeah, so we do two things. One is that the web apps we package are treated just like native apps, so they're downloaded and installed the same way, except from the Ovi point of view, it's really the exact same thing. The other thing we do, which is a nice little tool, is you can basically point, there's kind of this developer tool, you can point at a mobile website, click a button, and it will automatically generate a packaged version of the website. So then you now have this packaged web widget that you can sell.
So do you consider this a stopgap, having to compile or package into a native app?
I don't, because I think as web apps evolve further, you're going to want them to be resident on your device. So I believe there are actually technical reasons to package them and have them resident on your device, and it makes them easy to monetize as well.
All right, so second priority as a business owner, obviously monetization. Second priority is getting users, so distribution. One of the challenges that have been cited for web apps is obviously discovery, and how do I find those web apps? Steve, with native apps, there's a pretty clear sort of discovery path with app stores, just a variety of app stores in terms of discovering those apps. But for web apps, how do you get discovered? What do you do? And so I'll point to an interesting analogy. A number of these companies, Flirtomatic or MocoSpace, et cetera, have been focused on building native apps, and they've started as a web app.
Yeah, so I think that's the beauty of an open system, is that you can go back to all the things that work in the web. Some of our brands leverage a huge amount of search engine traffic, and some of that's mobile search engine traffic. And because they're early in the game, they show up much higher in the mobile indexes than they do the web indexes. And it's surprising to me that those mobile indexes even are that popular. But as the carriers have kind of let go of their catalogs and inserted the Googles and the Bings of the world into their catalogs, that's where that traffic's going. And so now you can be more creative in using doing SEO and look for other ways to find traffic rather than totally relying on the App Store catalog and hoping to get featured.
So leveraging search and SEO is more traditional web SEM to drive traffic to your web app.
Exactly.
Patrick, outside of GetJar, any other tips or tricks that you suggest to web application developers for discovery?
Yeah, sure. As a matter of fact, one of the things that we've been working on is kind of like, well, how do apps and web apps get discovered outside of GetJar? And that may seem strange since, ultimately we want traffic to come to GetJar. But essentially the way we do it is that as soon as you submit or upload an app to GetJar, whether it's a web app or an application, GetJar automatically creates what we call an Appit link. It's kind of like just a link that's created for your apps, and it works across all the different platforms, including web apps. And what that essentially allows publishers to do is that they essentially allows them to put that link anywhere. So you could, for example, you could put that link on Twitter, and you could tweet that link. You could put that link on your website, and you could just have it there and have people click on it. It's going to, as soon as they click on it, it takes them to your page on GetJar, where we automatically detect the handset, and if they have a feature phone or if it's a web app, they download that. If it's an APK, or if it's a COD file, then they download that. So essentially, that's how we help discovery. Yeah, it's a permanent link.
Permanent link in SEO.
Exactly.
Okay, so I'm going to switch to the most important perspective, the consumer perspective, which we've hinted about and talked about a little bit as we've gone along. Roy, one of the arguments against web apps is it's too easy to build a web app, which is something we've been talking about from the developer perspective. It's nice because it's easy, but it's also an argument against web apps. And if it's too easy, it dilutes apps and makes poor quality apps start appearing. What is your perspective? How do you deal with this?
Well, I think that we've been talking about native apps and web apps, but there's also the case for just mobile websites in that there's a lot more, let's say, desktop destination websites into the tens or if not 100 million range, and there's like 250,000, I think, what the latest count is, iPhone apps. So there's just a lot more opportunity for small developers, small businesses to get into the mobile web through a website, and the economics are much more attractive for them, and that's why you see the potential to have
the economics in terms of monetization.
No, the economics are building the site,
okay.
And the reality is, there are some great iPhone apps, and there's great reasons why they should have been native apps, but there's a lot of developers that aren't making money.
Just following that track for a second, so one of the comments made at Mobile 2.0 from Angry Birds, from Peter at Angry Birds, was he chose the iPhone because he said, as his first platform, he said, if I can win on iPhone, then I can win on any app store, because it was the most competitive. Is one of the arguments for choosing web app, if I can win on the web, then I can win on any platform?
The Broadway argument.
Too many web apps.
Well, obviously you would go to an iPhone app because that is where the action is today. There's no doubt. But the argument here is yes, and that will be viable for a long time because Apple's vested interest is to keep everyone writing to that platform.
Scott.
But there's also a case for web.
Yeah, so I think it's important to sort of understand that it's not just about selling your app on the App Store, but there's also like at least 10 other ways that you can make money. You can extend your business. Your sale, we work with Sugar CRM. We're extending their business. They add that on top of their fee. That's an additional fee, right? You've got pay per month, a subscription. You've got the freemium. Like some of the games from NG Moco have this freemium type of model. So I think winning on the App Store is one way, but we see a lot of other uses for applications and monetization models that I think are important to understand and really are specific to your specific business needs.
Do you do anything within Appcelerator in terms of apps and ratings for all of these web apps? You know, given 1,000 apps per month and how that's accelerating?
Yeah, I mean, we're starting to get in. I mean, we don't really rate apps per se, but we certainly have developers sort of rate each other as developers and sort of have our own ecosystem that builds up so that, you know, you can understand who is the best developer for me if I'm in New Jersey and I've got a website that I want to go mobile and I need someone to help me with that. And that's less about the application and more about I've got a business that's online. I'm really thinking about this mobile space and how do I get into it. That's typically our point of entry.
Matt, do we need to rate the web? Does there need to be an NSTL for the web?
Well, we've talked about trying to be able to actually, you know, yeah, essentially have people be able to rate the web.
Or I guess is that the sort of inherent AI of, you know, search?
Well, I don't know about that, but I mean, certainly it would be great to be able to have more trust in the web. What you're seeing is actually produced by, you know, a person who claims that, you know, expertise in the field and things like that. But yeah, for the most part, I don't think we need to rate the web just yet.
So Patrick, we've talked about this a little bit in sort of consumer perspective, and what matters is the user experience. What matters is the user experience. If the UX can be guaranteed to be the same between web versus native, what would you suggest people to build in?
Web. I mean, I think, you know, at the end of the day, a lot of the conversations that we have, whether it's developers, you know, here or in India, or whether it's advertising agencies or brands, you know, the fundamental thing that you have to look at is that it's basically a reach versus engagement play, right? The basic premise behind apps is they provide a deep, meaningful engagement that web apps generally don't. Now, that's not necessarily the case anymore because web is obviously improving, but the thing that you're always going to have with web is that you're going to have that reach. And ultimately, you know, the way that we kind of look at apps is that apps are like consumer goods, right? It's like kind of buying a bottle of Coke. The reality is that these are very fast-moving, impulse purchase type of buys that consumers are making every day. They don't really think about it. They just go out, they find it, they download it. And so as a function of that, the critical thing for developers to be successful and monetize is you need wide distribution. You need to reach a lot of people. You need to reach them very fast. Web is probably one of the best ways to do that.
Roy, you know, Opera is very global. We've been talking about sort of web versus native and really just sort of taking for granted North America, flat rate data plans. One of the arguments against native from the consumer perspective is it's potentially more data intensive and more costly. Do you have any perspective on web versus native in prepaid countries?
Well, we at Opera, we have two versions of our browser platform, and one is Opera Mini, and that is a server-assisted product that compresses the data traffic, and that is ideal for our emerging markets. We recently announced widgets for that, so the benefit to the author is the same widget form factor they may have offered for the full browser platform is available to be distributed in the Opera Mini platform for the emerging markets. You know, I would say that at some level, you know, it becomes you know, relatively the same, whether it be that widget app or a native app. You know, the data access fees.
So the onus is on the
URLs
developer.
going to the web, basically.
The onus is on the developer to develop or optimize correctly.
Because at the end of the day, you're just sending out URL requests. It could be a native app or a browser doing the same thing.
Steve, one of the other arguments from a consumer perspective is power consumption. And some argue that web apps maybe consume more power or less power than native apps. Do you have any opinion on that?
Yeah, a strong opinion on that. I think they don't need to be necessarily, but they end up doing that. I guess, and my perspective on this in general is that for a lot of brands, they don't really have a choice between web and mobile. You really, you have your power users that really want an app, and you need to keep them happy. And you'll have those that really don't care about your brand, but come onto your brand through a search engine, and you need to accommodate them as well. So you really don't, if you're a large brand, you don't really have a choice. You've got to do both. But I find it kind of almost arrogant of some brands to think that I'm actually going to download their application onto my phone, because I couldn't care less about something that I just stumbled on the web, and then they're going to force me to download an app rather than just take me to something where I can see the content and I'd never think of their brand again. And then if I do choose to install, now they ask, I see this warning on Android, all these warnings of things that they want access to that are somewhat personal. And some of them look like they're going to consume a bunch of power, and boom, I'm not going to install them. And I think that's going to become an increasing bigger problem for developers when they really don't have any ill intent. But some app gets installed in an application, locks it up, creates a bunch of files, it runs in the background constantly, and slowly over time they install things and their device battery life shorter and shorter. And I think there's going to be backlash against apps because of that.
So continuing on that track, actually led to the next sort of consumer perspective, security with consumers. Matt, one of the concerns is if we move to a full web world and somebody figures out that one JavaScript exploit, everybody goes down. Is that reasonable, or is that unrealistic scenario?
I mean, it's certainly a concern, right? But the way the standards work, we write the standards, we take a crack at it, we get a bunch of implementations, and even before it's ever finalized, we already know that it works and that it's people have implemented it. So hopefully we cut these things off the path before they get to the final standardization stage. But there's always surprises out there, and I think the native app world is in for the same exact set of surprises themselves.
A quick audience poll. How many people feel more secure with a native app than a web app? So there's a few who prefer native in terms of security. All right, so I'm going to switch to another perspective. These are the, for some, the less interesting or less relevant perspectives, but the operator perspective and how an operator thinks about native versus web. One of the arguments against web apps is they're very chatty. And this causes a lot of pain on the operator's network. Scott, do you have any opinion with Appcelerator? And it should be native so you can use the modern day middleware cloud to make it less chatty?
Well, I think yeah, right. So so we issued a survey to about 2,400 developers last week. We found everyone that we talk to actually wants to pull as much of that computing actually client side and actually use the cloud for what it's good at, network transfer and so forth. But everything else can be crunched, can be stored, can be used on the device, and that does make it less chatty. It also allows you to sort of really kind of get that optimal experience really running and fine tune on the native device. So.
Roy, in your operator conversations, what do you think operators think? Do they want native or do they want web?
That's a good question, because I thought operators were still very focused on the app download segments, but I was recently at the Verizon Developers Conference just a couple of weeks ago, and a lot of the mobile web sessions, and they're very much advocating the right app for the right place, that kind of thing, but very much a focus on mobile web and browser access in addition to the App Store. So, I think it's they just want to be there when the consumer's using the web, and they want to be there for the right fit, whether it be browser or...
So they're straddling.
They're monetizing.
Daniel, from the OEM platform perspective, take your Nokia hat off for a second. How do you think does a handset manufacturer or does a platform provider have a preference? Do you think they would prefer the developer to build native or web?
I would say the platform just wants to get the most apps. So basically you want to do a good job of providing both so that the developers can do whatever they want.
Do you build a website to app converter? Or would that be bad?
I think that's a great idea.
Matt, do you think from the platform sort of OEM perspective, is it just the most number of apps? Is that the goal? Or what do you think they would prefer?
The most number of apps? Well, I mean, it's most number of paying customers, right? Presumably be the goal, whether it's one app or 50. So I don't really understand the question, but if you like, I can take another crack.
No worries. Moving along. No worries. Advertiser perspective. There's a couple advertisers in the room. Every single advertiser I've spoken to in the last 2 months has said they want native. They don't want web apps because the advertising experience is not rich enough. They can't track it properly. The analytics isn't there. Whatever it is, the stack isn't there, and they're able to extract more value out of native. And in some ways, AdMob and a lot of the mobile advertising industry was saved in some ways from in-application advertising. Steve, you have an opinion. You have customers like Match.com who are ad-supported. How does this get solved with HTML5? Are we going to have web ad frameworks?
Well, Match isn't actually ad supported. They charge subscriptions, but some of the other companies like eBite, City Search, certainly ad supported. Yeah, I think there's certainly a lot more inventory in the mobile web, and a lot of it isn't very good. Click-through rates have really burned some of the ad buyers. And in app, there's the opportunity to sell directly into the App Store. And so I think in the short term, that's probably true. The CPMs are going to be higher. But you know, I'm not of the opinion that that's going to continue to be the trend.
Roy, any thoughts? I mean, obviously you're pushing web, but if developers can't make money, so the business owner, does he have to write native? Or is this the 5-year?
Generally, we're pushing web, but we actually have an ad network, an ad optimization network. You may have been familiar with AdMarble, Opera merged and acquired AdMarble, and we do both in-app and web advertising. And in working with the publishers and brands, they want the best ad served to the best demographic possible. They want performing ads, and in the past that was hard to do. And increasingly, just like in desktop, where there's a lot of services that offer finer-tuned demographic targeting of ads, we're starting to see that in mobile as well. So I think we'll see both.
It's coming.
Yeah, we'll see both better in-app and both web, and I think it's just getting to the right ad, the right person, the right time, location coming soon.
Okay, so I want to switch gears here. We talked about some of the different perspectives. Patrick, with HTML5, a lot of sort of industry insiders that I'm talking to expect that it's going to be adopted in enterprise first, not consumer. And the reason for that is enterprise doesn't have app stores. Enterprise doesn't really care necessarily about monetization because the way the apps are paid for is differently. Do you think that's valid? Are you seeing a lot of enterprise come into GetJar?
No, enterprises generally don't come to GetJar, to be honest. I mean, I think we're very much viewed as a consumer play. Whether enterprise is going to go more aggressively towards web versus apps, I think depends really on what they want to do and what kind of service or what kind of functionality they want to provide the company employees and things like that, or whether they're doing B2B stuff. So I think they're probably going to be less concerned about the depth of engagement and more about how easy is this to deploy and how many customers can we reach. Certainly, but that's hypothetical. Honestly, they don't use us, so it's less clear to me what they would prefer.
Scott, do you, within Appcelerator, do you think enterprises will adopt HTML5 before the consumer?
I can certainly see before the consumer, but I do think the point we sort of hit on it, but I mean everything that I'm hearing that we see when we're talking to folks, it all comes down to user experience. Every single discussion typically comes down, and typically the arbiter is, I don't know, I'm actually kind of curious. I mean, like if we take like Twitter, for example, I mean, who uses, if we look at like the Twitter web app versus like a Twitter client app, I mean, just a show of hands, who uses the Twitter web application? And then who uses a Twitter native client application? I mean, we can say the same thing on Facebook. The users, and that's an example of an application. It doesn't matter if it's enterprise or consumer. It's an example of an application that runs equivalently on those two different platforms. And I do think that it is always user experience, even in the enterprise, that will win out. And that's kind of where we're at.
And I think the real comparison is how many would use the native versus web if that web app had an icon on the home screen as well. Because I think those apps, or those items with icons on the home screen, I think are used 3 to 4 times more. I think you have the statistic, 4 times more than without it.
We generally see 4 to 8x increase, basically. So if you've got your icon installed, even if it's a web app, you're going to have visitors 4 to 8 times more often.
Matt, jumping back to you. I ask you all the web standards related questions. So, under the sort of assumption that 5-10 years, I think everybody but one person in the room thought we're going to eventually move to web apps, there's still this whole plugin and extension ecosystem. You look at Firefox and all the extensions that are available, you look at the Chrome browser and how quickly they've got extensions made available. Some are arguing that extensions and plugins are effectively writing native on the web. What is your opinion?
Well, I think it depends on the type of extension that you have, right? The Gears geolocation bit is something that Google came to us and we worked together to bring it into the web standards world. So you didn't need a plugin to do this geolocation stuff. Other things like ad blocking extension. Well, yeah, but we're not going to have that in HTML5, I imagine. So it depends on the purpose of the extension. But I think we're seeing a lot of cool innovation going on there that's moving, faster than the browsers, faster than the web standards, and that stuff will all be eventually rolled back into the core.
Roy, so do you think plugins is the new native development for the web 5 years from now?
You mean as in plugins or extensions?
Plugins or extensions, yeah. Or does it go away?
Well, no, I think that there's always a natural incentive for OEMs and platforms to have something differentiated from the other platform and the other OEM. So I think you'll see things like geolocation, it becomes standardized very quickly, and innovations will occur, and you'll see those grabbed and by a certain OEM or a certain platform, and over time they become standards, just like all happened before. So we'll see standardized extensions, and we'll see innovation, and we'll see maybe some one-offs as innovations occur.
So in some ways, native never goes away.
Yeah, there's always going to be that challenge. The argument though is, it's more productive, more efficient. There's more developers to do web-based development. But yes, there will always be some innovations on the leading edge, and there will always be opportunities for the natural incentives that OEMs and platforms have to differentiate themselves. They'll always be there.
Steve, browser as an OS. When Apple first launched the iPhone, you could only do web apps. I spoke to, I don't want to mention his name, but a former Apple executive, and he said they thought everybody would build web apps, but they didn't. And then they launched the native SDK. Palm followed a very similar track. Palm is sort of browser as the OS. Web apps, they launched the native SDK about a year later. What is your opinion? Again, is this a stopgap?
Well, I think what happened was they provided two more critical pieces of the whole puzzle: monetization and distribution. When they created the App Store, and that's why it exploded. And so that probably doesn't change. But we've seen that cycle throughout the history of the last 10 years of mobile, where an open system, people develop for it, and then a closed system comes along, and it has better or easier ways to develop, more interesting things to do, and they draw in developers, and then it gets crowded, and it becomes less open, and the developers get annoyed, and the consumers get annoyed, and then they migrate back to the open systems. And we see that cycle back, where there's a lot of innovation came out brought by the OEMs and drew the developers back in, and the ones early in, the early adopters, the ones made a lot of money. But as that's gotten crowded, we think the same trend's going to happen, where they're going to move back to the open system.
Okay, so I want to switch to a little bit more of a game here. We've been talking about native versus web, but I think what really matters is let's take some real-life examples and see if you build it in native or web. So I'm going to audience poll each of these apps, and these are all apps that you probably know. So I'm going to start with Angry Birds. If you're not familiar with Angry Birds, it's a bird you slingshot across the screen into a building to take down the building. If you had to build that app today, how many people in the audience would build that as a web app? Okay, so the web app. Panel, what do you guys think? Would you build it as a web app today?
It's written in Lua, scripting language. Well, it's got to be all native. I mean, the physics engine, all the computations. Yeah, I think it's a native.
Okay, because of the sort of the graphics and
the graphics, the physics. I think, yeah, the UI, all those considerations.
Next app, Lose It. Lose It's a calorie counter. Really simple app. You just log what you're eating. If you had to write that today, would you write that as a web app? Fair number of people in the audience. Panel.
Yeah, web.
Absolutely web. Smule. Smule is what powered the iPhone orchestra. You could blow through the mic sensor on the device and it would play back music. How many in the audience would write that as a web app? Nobody. Nobody here?
Yeah,
Two native?
Didn't Android just make the mic go? That's my understanding. So maybe it's possible, but I don't think it's possible.
What was that?
You couldn't do it. You can't get the microphone.
Okay, yeah. So I think Steve was mentioning that you can now get the microphone on Android.
Yeah, I thought Android was announced.
Pandora, free music streaming service. Doesn't really use any specific device native functionality. How many people here would write that as a web app? Uses the great HTML5 audio tags. What does the panel think?
Doable, and I think a good idea. An over-the-air last month, another conference. Somebody did that in one of their hackathons, built not quite Pandora, but a similar thing, in 24 hours as a web app.
Okay, so Google Maps. Everybody's probably used Google Maps. Doesn't really use any device functionality except GPS, which is available through HTML5. How many people here would build that as a web app? So it's about less than half of the panel.
I'd go native. I mean, how can you do routes? How can you do anything sophisticated with the animations? I mean, I'd never pull up Google Maps outside of native app.
Daniel, do you agree?
Yeah, I think the key thing with Google Maps is the panning. So they do a really good job so you can pan quickly, and I think the native support to be able to do that.
So graphics rendering driven. Matt, do you agree with all the sort of hardware accelerated WebKit engines coming with all the mobile phone chipsets?
Yeah, I mean the desktop app, the desktop web version of Google Maps works great for me. So I can't imagine why.
So we're split on Google Maps. Okay, so we're out of time. Ask one question to panelists, and then obviously take some audience questions as promised. So just going down the road here, I'm curious what year you think HTML5. We kind of talked about this at the very beginning. What year do you think HTML5 goes mainstream? Anybody want to take it first?
Well, we heard from Verizon it'd be 4 years before it's fully out there. I think I hope it'll be sooner than that. So,
4 years, so 2014.
but they're still selling a lot of phones that are pretty limited.
Anybody else?
But Opera and other browser vendors support HTML5. Many of the
on mobile.
Yeah, it is evolving, and it'll continue to evolve. So I think your question is, when does that 80-20 rule switch? And it's, I think, the relevant part of it, right? And I certainly fall into the earlier camp. You shouldn't be surprised by that. So I fall into I can't choose next week, so I'll do the 3-year camp.
Anybody else?
I would say 3 to 5 years in the U.S., but probably outside the U.S. more like 5 to 8.
Sorry, go ahead.
The HTML5 will always be good for serving up web content.
Yeah. how many? And so before jumping sort of audience questions here, how many in the audience? We did the poll at the beginning of the panel. How many people?
What does he say? W3C guy.
W3C guy.
So the question is, when would I advise people to write an HTML5 app over native app?
When is it
Shift occur like the 80-20?
Yeah, I'd say we're probably in the 3-year range.
3 years?
We're certainly seeing lots of parts of HTML5 out there already in full use every day, everywhere. But
we did that poll at the beginning of the panel. How many years did people think until HTML5 goes mainstream? How many people here changed their opinion from the beginning of this panel to now? Only one. Okay, so so if I remember correctly, I think the majority was between 3 and 5 years. So I guess we'll wait and see. Anyways, all right. So audience questions. Right there.
So just to context myself, I run an interactive agency. We do a lot of mobile apps for bigger brands. One of the questions that we come up always is from the requirements of the bigger brands is that the speed process, the speed to get to the app. The web becomes a basic line infrastructure for a web app is right now very slow. So whenever that's why we always move towards a native app because of the infrastructure that is not being developed yet, and it becomes very slow. My question would be that.
Yeah, are you talking about launch time?
Yeah, the launch time.
Launch time, native versus web.
Yeah, I mean, so we typically work in about 6-week development cycles. So our goal always when we're talking to developers is you should be able to get your development cycle down on the mobile app just like the same release cycle as the web. And then, then you're cooking with gas.
My question was the speed of that.
He's talking about the startup. The icon.
Oh, the technical speed? Well, yeah. I mean,
because the browser obviously has to load optimally.
Then you're basically going to split down the line on this panel on what we previously talked about.
I guess Matt, with HTML5, you could probably the first run might be slow, but with sort of local caching, you can speed it up.
Good use of the app cache, good use of local storage, manifest file, all that stuff to speed it right up.
Next question.
Battery life. Given the problems, say, that Android developers have, that they have to be pretty careful and optimize the code to preserve the battery. What role do you see that playing on the next 3 to 5 years on whether we can go majority web or stay majority native, given the research on battery life and how device power is accelerating faster than battery life?
Yeah, I'm just about to. The question is battery life, web versus native, and how does that evolve? Any comments? Or we don't know?
Yes, batteries are evolving, right? More and more of my phone and all of my devices are becoming more and more battery. You know, I've got a MacBook that has battery, baked into it, can't change and stuff. And I think it's that, or we all start plugging in. And
discuss offline.
I'll answer it like this. Let me give this answer. As a native app, you can write a bad app that drains battery. Same thing as a web app. So I think at the end of the day, it's up to the developer to not do anything stupid. So basically, you have to know what your app is doing and you have to write it well. And whether it's web or native, it doesn't matter so much.
So here and then here.
What do you see the impact of broadband-enabled, specifically MiFi along with 3G, tablets, and what we see with all of them hitting the market in the next year and a half? Do you see that accelerating, and do you count that as a part of the mobile ecosystem because some of them have carrier billing and some don't, or some type of billing built in?
So how does this all evolve when tablets and netbooks and more just alternate screen sizes emerge?
That are on carriers or broadband providers who take
cellular devices.
Yeah, it seems pretty likely that innovation and network bandwidth is going to accelerate faster than the carriers can keep up with the bandwidth demand. And so it's to make your app sufficient in the network calls is probably going to continue to be an important thing.
No, I'm talking about the market impact. So you're saying
the billing and distribution?
Yeah, the fact that these are going to be a larger set of actual devices, not phones or laptops or tablets. We're seeing trending saying that from all the big hardware guys, and also the people who are selling them. They're really pushing on that. And also TV devices that are hooked to the broadband. Yeah, de facto billing built in. Yeah, that's stupid.
I think that's my personal opinion is I think that there's a little bit probably of too much hype there. I think that if you look at mobile is not just hype. If you look at the number of downloads, the amount of hundreds of millions of dollars have been paid out to developers. Some developers. Definitely there's a business there. I think tablets, it's way too early to call this. Gartner's saying that there's probably a market of about 20 million tablets this year alone, of which 5 million are already iPads. And the iPad has the advantage of having the content, whereas the other tablets don't. So I think it's way too early to call whether there is a real market out for tablets today, or whether it's just a product of iPad success given its branding and its developer following in the tablet itself. On the other side, in terms of devices that are using applications, again, I think it's going to be contextual to each and every device, what kind of applications they're using, right? So you see ads, the Ford Focus that are using apps. It's going to depend on, how many apps really make sense for the consumer, for the driver in this case, and how much network broadband, they take. But I think it's a little bit early at this point, and I think the focus on apps, at least for now, is still going to be squarely around mobile phones. I think my 2 cents on it.
We had a question here, and then I'll take, I think, maybe one or two more after that. So.
Yes, I just want to go back to polling, as I'm curious to hear your thoughts on which app would be better suited for location-based dating.
So location-based dating, how many people in the audience think that should be built as a web app? Very few. So I think that's your answer. Any questions on this side?
You got.
I'll repeat it. Okay, so looking at Pandora and this sort of category of apps that need to be secure, obviously Pandora, music streaming, DRM, specifically to Matt from the W3C. Yeah, so any opinions on sort of, we touched on this a bit, but any opinions on web application development and security?
That particular use case, like DRM streaming media, I don't think is something we would particularly touch. And there are, technologies out there that are web-based that will do such things. you know, but I think it still is a compelling app to do on the web, regardless.
I'll take one more question from the back. I've been giving preference to the front. Anybody in the back? Okay, somebody in the front. So this is the final question, and then wrap up.
Do you see standards ever catching up with native, the richness of native applications? Is that going to be an endless race? Is it ever going to stop?
So I don't think the standards are actually not part of the race.
Just repeat the question. So.
Sorry. Will the standards ever catch up to the native apps capabilities? And the standards actually, we don't. Sounds awful to say. We don't innovate the standards. The standards sort of reflect, what the community requires and brings to us, and so the standards are always behind what's going to be the cutting edge. We're working on building a floor, not a ceiling. We're not trying to restrict innovation. We're trying to have a very good common floor for everything that everything can use. So in a lot of ways, web standards will always lag behind native apps, but that doesn't mean there aren't advantages.
And it's not just a standards question as well, it's a technology question, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the problem with the industry is that, the technology behind the hands itself evolves a lot faster than the technology behind the networks. And, the CapEx behind putting a network in place versus the cost of launching, another Droid X or Droid 2 is vastly different. So from that perspective, standards aside, it's a question of, well, can the infrastructure play catch up with the device play? And there, I think the answer is self-evident so far.
Final comment here from Matt.
I should also point out, though, what I mean by that isn't that the browsers aren't going to be capable, just that these standards will lag the innovation of the browsers, right?
Okay, so I know that more of the audience have more questions. You can obviously take those offline. I think they'll be here for at least a few minutes. So just a round of applause for the panelists. And
All right, hold your horses here. Thanks a lot, Raj. It's a great panel. So this is the time for our announcements. So if you guys have some announcements, events, thanks for coming up. Please line up over here. A couple of thank yous out there is John Lynn, who's filming this, and we also have a Ustream account. You guys check it out. And also, if you are on Twitter, we are at MomoSV. And also, you can also find us at momomoney.us. So, come on up.
Hi everybody, my name is Daniel Odio. I'm a co-founder of Appmaker. Appmaker is one of the leading platforms used to build native apps. We just relocated from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco. We're in Soma, and we're going to be announcing this month a $1 million fundraising round. That means we have money to hire developers, and we'd love to talk to you. We're specifically looking for Android folks. Again, my name is Daniel Odio, O-D-I-O, and the company is Appmaker. Come up and talk to me later if you do Android or iOS. Thanks.
Hey folks, my name is Mike. Working with a company called Chomp. We're making available a web services search API for iPhone applications. Anybody that's looking for a replacement for iTunes search, or just looking for a different style to search for a website or a product, come and grab me. I'll give you some info about what we have.
Hi, I'm William Leon. I work at Microsoft. We are hiring. We're looking for a mobile phone developer evangelist. And if you're interested, come see me. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Glenn Keithley. I'm a manager of mobile applications development at Hippocrates. We do medical software for doctors on mobile platforms. We help doctors save lives using medical software. And we're hiring at the moment for iOS, Android, and contract iOS developers. So if you're interested in any of that, come talk to me afterwards.
My name is Austin Oswaki. I'm a comic book publisher. We develop a line of comic book apps. Today we just launched a comic book on MTV.com. So we're basically looking for more business development ventures. So I'm around. My company's going online. Thanks.
Hi everybody, my name is Jason Crawford and I'm co-founder of Barcode Hero. We are aiming to transform the way people shop in brick and mortar stores. And our first application, Barcode Hero for iPhone, is a social barcode scanner. Lets you scan product barcodes, get product information, and then easily share what you're shopping for and what products you recommend. We have raised a seed round of $750,000 from some top Valley angels, and we are now hiring engineers. We are looking for both iPhone and Android. So if you're interested, talk to me or go to our website. Again, I'm Jason Crawford, Barcode Hero. Find me in the red shirt. Thanks.
Hi, my name is Kaz. My company hosting an event on this Thursday and next coming Monday. On Thursday, it just says we are inviting special guests from Japan who created the Ruby language. His name is Max. We are hosting the event at Trilibis on Thursday, and on Monday we are hosting the event at Embarcadero in Mountain View. For more details, let's go to the investfk.com. Investfk.com.
Hi, my name is Christopher Pixley. I'm an app developer. I just submitted my first iPhone app to the store today. Here's hoping for a fast approval. It's a haiku sharing app, so you can write haiku, share it with your friends, and find other people writing great stuff out there. I encourage you to check it out at haiku-app. That's IKU-app.com. And I'm also looking for my next development project, so if you're looking for an agile web or iPhone app developer, talk to me.
Great, thank you. My name is Kate Connolly. I have been working in the casual game space for the last 10 years. Most recently was general manager of Dicky Games, the largest free online game site in the U.S. I have left MTV Networks and am working on a new idea.
Hi guys, if you want to talk, can you go out to the lobby or just talk a bit quieter so you can hear these guys? Because someone might want to hear them. Thanks.
And I've got an interesting idea around a similar concept that made Addictive Games so successful online. And looking for really talented developers to come join the team, help us knock the cover off this ball. It's a really cool opportunity. I'd love to tell any qualified developers more specifics. You can meet me over there in the next room. After this. Thank you.
Hi, my name is KP Naidu. I work for a company called Wiz Technology. We're a custom app developer. We develop for iPhone, iPad, Android, and we're looking for developers for the iPhone and for Android. We do Android porting, and we've got some projects we're working on which are really good. So if you're looking for if you're an Android programmer or iPhone programmer, we're looking for some good ones.
Hi, my name is Leah Prescott. I am a research consultant writing a report for a company called eConsultancy, and I'm looking for people who are in advertising or marketing or working with advertisers or marketers who are in mobile, whether you work for, say, an ad network or you're working with you have an app that accepts advertising, or you work with advertisers that are building apps. So I'm interested in interviewing people for this report, and you could potentially be quoted, and you'll definitely be referenced in this report that'll go out to about 100,000 members that we have. So just come find me if you're interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Leanne. Hello, my name is Anne. I'm with Circle Click, based here in San Francisco. We're 2 weeks away from launching our first web-based app called Final Approach. It is the effective way to build landing pages in minutes. I'm looking for talented PHP developers and willing interns. I mean willing to learn about the web, nothing else. And by the way, I just want to say SAS rules, native drools. Thank you.
All right, guys. Hey, thank you very much. Next month is top 10 mistakes startups do. So if you're a startup and want to have some